I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
World War II, the longest, most trying war of history, now had America involved. The news of war itself was devastating, but it never would have prepared America for what happened next. President D. Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945. This caused a wave of grief over America. We were left with no guidance until Harry S. Truman took place as the President of the United States of America.
I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations.
After Germany finally surrendered in the May of 1945, President Truman faced his attention toward the war in Asia, the Pacific Front. The Japanese would not surrender, and the war seemed everlasting. We were losing troops by the day. On April 25, 1945, President Truman was notified about a project that President Roosevelt had approved of years before he died. It was called the Manhattan Project. In August of 1939, Albert Einstein sent an urgent letter to President Roosevelt about a new discovery. He found that nuclear fission could lead to the first ever atomic bomb. Einstein also believed that the German government was actively supporting research in this area and urged the United States to do likewise. In December 1942, President Roosevelt approved funding the Manhattan Project, which would ultimately cost $2 billion. That's $25 billion in today's money. Although various options were studied and tested, the decision that was made was to do the gas diffusion and plutonium method. At the time, the general agreement was that the bombs could be produced during the first half of 1945. However, there was no guarantee that the United States would overtake Germany in the race for the bomb. With funding and a team of experts in place and full support of the president and military, production facilities were built in Tennessee, Washington, and New Mexico. Despite being such a large-scale project, all was done entirely in secret. At precisely 5:30 a.m. on Monday, July 16, 1945, the atomic age began, with the test of the Trinity bomb over the New Mexico desert. We were ready to set the bombs on Japan.
There can be no peace in the world until the military power of Japan is destroyed, with the same completeness as was the power of the European dictators. To do that, we are now engaged in a process of deploying millions of our armed forces against Japan in a mass movement of troops and supplies and weapons over 14,000 miles, a military and naval feat unequaled in all history. Substantial portions of Japan's key industrial centers have been leveled to the ground in a series of record incendiary raids. What has already happened to Tokyo will happen to every Japanese city whose industries feed the Japanese war machine. If the Japanese insist on continuing resistance beyond the point of reason, their country will suffer the same destruction as Germany. Our blows will destroy their whole modern industrial plant and organization, which they have built up during the past century and which they are now devoting to a hopeless cause. We have no desire or intention to destroy or enslave the Japanese people, but only surrender can prevent the kind of ruin which they have seen come to Germany as a result of continued useless resistance.
At 8:15 a.m. on August 6, 1945, the uranium bomb named Little Boy was released from the Enola Gay, which was piloted by Paul Tibbets.
About 45 seconds from the time the bomb left the airplane until it exploded. And I think there wasn't a man in the airplane that wasn't either timing it with his watch or counting or doing something. I was sure the bomb was a dud. I was sure it wasn't going to work.
Tibbets was wrong. The bomb did work, and it did more damage than expected.
I was astonished. It was a startling light. Even if you had your back turned to it, you felt the shock go through, right to the center of your brain. At the same time, any area of skin that was exposed became very hot. Heat. Such burning heat.
70,000 people perished within seconds, and 70,000 more were injured. By the end of 1945, death toll rose to 140,000, and 5 years later the numbers increased to 200,000 due to radiation.
An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East. We have spent more than $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and we have won. But the greatest marvel is not the size of the enterprise, its secrecy, or its cost, but the achievement of scientific brains in making it work.
After Japan failed to respond to America's plea for their surrender, a second attack took place on August 9th. The pilot, Charles Sweeney, dropped Fat Man, a plutonium bomb. It exploded 1,650 feet above the city of Nagasaki, killing 40,000 and injuring 60,000 more. By January 1946, 70,000 had died, eventually reaching 140,000.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. In the reply, there is no qualification.
On August 14, 1945, America had their wish granted. Japan finally surrendered. This was the day that World War II ended, yet an atomic era began.